topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
To Triversity Talk. I'm Wendy Stewart. I am here trying to thaw out in the Northeast. I'm coming to you from New York City. We have piles and piles of snow, and this is all coming on top of what I would consider politically a very horrific week and the events that have happened. So I told somebody today, I feel like I have been thrust into a parallel universe. But I am very happy to be here with everybody tonight. Our guest tonight, you know what? I often feel that like my timing with the guests has just out of luck has got something to do with the things going on in the news. And I want to jump right in with this person that is our guest tonight. I had met months ago and really wanted to have on the show. But like I said, timing is everything. And we're at, I would say, the perfect crossroads right now for what we're going to discuss tonight. Our guest tonight is the vice president of GAG, which stands for Gays Against Guns, which was an organization that was formed after the Pulse nightclub shooting. It is a non-for-profit. Over the last 10 years, our guest has taken to the streets, fighting for safer gun laws and honoring queer and trans lives lost to gun violence. We will be highlighting the amount of impact gun violence has on marginalized societies and in the LGBTQ community, of course. So please welcome Ty Cersley. Thank you.
Hi, Wendy. Thank you. This is Poppers.
Oh, the cute Nugget is sitting at the end of the couch. I need to explain to our audience, we always encourage our guests to bring their animals on, and I didn't say anything to Ty, and he showed up with Poppers. What a great name for a dog. Hello, Poppers. How are you? And Ty,
traveling well.
Where are you right now?
Blanche Devereaux's apartment. No, I'm in I'm in LA. We flew out right before the storm to visit on my in-laws, and my husband's mother had some medical appointments. It was good timing. We weren't working, and then our flight got canceled coming back. Even though everything's stopped, it's still kind of, they're catching up with flights. So we're here another night. I didn't want to get a whole new mic because I have my podcast stuff at home and all of that. So I got my little game headset on. I figured we could do it this way. So it's in bed with Ty.
We're all good. I don't have a headset or a microphone. You know, I have my guests come on with headsets and microphones. I don't know. I've just been like the last 5 years since I've been doing this, just using my computer. Now you're making me feel like I need to get accessories.
No, I had to get something new. I had an older mic that can do a lot of things.
Right.
So there's no need to get like a travel mic. If I figured I could just put this on too in an action or something if I wanted to record myself. He's going to be, we'll call him back later.
Oh, he's so cute. He's just fidgeting. That's what dogs do. So I'm really happy that you are able to make the time to be on our show tonight. And I want to start out with actually talking about, since we're talking about podcasting and everything, could you tell our audience about Radio GAG?
Sure. So about 2 years in, we were formed, like you said, it was 2016. About 2 years in, WBAI was looking for a gun violence prevention show. It all kind of tied in where we would be a news show. about gun violence prevention, and of course talk about ourselves and how we honor those lost with the memoriams and highlighting
Of course.
those lost specifically in the queer community first, like with the Pulse massacre, but also learning throughout the years other people and how gun violence affects their lives. So first we started off with giving news because we were part of the gun violence prevention movement. There's a
Right.
national call that I'm on once a week, and everyone says, okay, this bill is, going to pass, and this state has just changed their regulations, and all the technical stuff about who the ATF is and who falls under all of that money, that all gets explained. But at the end of the day, we're direct action. So we
Right.
take to the streets to not to make phone calls to our congressman, that we will publish that information. We for instance, went to FedEx to protest. They had a lot of discounts for NRA members, and as you remember, after Parkland was probably the
Yeah.
key, the linchpin to stop a lot of that funding. We called out a lot of the people supporting the NRA, and the we call it, it's like a machine of death, really, because you have the politicians, you have the funding, they're blocking the safer gun laws, you have all of that intertwined. It's so difficult to tackle, and this was really the first time the queer community was thrown into it. So when we decided that when we figured out we could have a show, we started having all of those guests on, so we could have survivors, we could have someone from every town or Brady, and talk about, or other queer up and coming grassroots things. So we really had a great show, and then COVID, we turned kind of
Yeah. For all of
into a
us.
podcast,
Right.
and then that just seemed to outlive what was going on in the radio. So we still have interviews and news updates, but we talk about ourselves and how you can get involved, because a lot of people will ask when they find out you talk about this
Right.
at any meeting. When you talk about what you do, they're like, how do I get involved? And my first thing isn't always money or take to the streets, but you can share and look at how other people are handling this weight that you're under. You said it was you said like you've been transported to another
That
parallel
okay,
universe.
there is so much in what you said, and I'm gonna backtrack a little bit. You talked about when you first started Radio Gag, and you would talk about getting bills passed and all of that. And I believe that's super important to do, right? But for me, that's not who I am. I do this live show because for me, I can reach a lot more people that way. And
Right.
doing Radio Gag, you can get people's wheels turning. When you start with bills and things like that, and yeah, we have to do them, but my God, every day there's another bill, pro, con, blah, 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 blah. We're now in a time where we have to take direct action. I mean, look at what just happened, all right, in the past week and a half. I never thought I would see that.
But there
And
has been a slow build towards it,
yes,
and it's been
absolutely.
unbelievable to think. Um, it's been actually unbelievable to think that I'd have to do a 10-year review, because we're doing a decade now. So this is a decade of
Yeah,
direct action. I don't want to do a review because it's my mentally living in the state of everything we've worked for is just evaporated by this
that's what I was going to
administration.
say. Right,
But
right.
it's been marketed that way. Gun violence, is a part of American culture, but the way that American deals with other people's loss, there's a separation. There's the lack of empathy there. So we highlight one person, their
Thank you.
loss with the HBs that you've seen visuals of people that are dressed in all white, but they're veiled, and then we have a placard of who they are, and
Right.
that's what GAG started as first.
And those are very, very effective. It when they wear the what is it called again? Human. What is that
We just
protest
call them
called?
human beings, or there are
Human being.
HBs for short,
Right.
but they represent someone lost to gun violence. For instance, we had our press conference to enter our 10th year, and I wanted to bring some of the losses. Pulse, we had two members of Pulse being represented because that was the catalyst that brought
Yep.
us into the work, and then a trans woman of color that was killed because we found out how marginalized this small community is, and yet riddled with gun violence and
Absolutely.
other horrible losses, other than just, a shooting in the backyard. These are like awful attacks. So
Absolutely.
highlighting that, being a big part of, Trans Day of Awareness, um, finding out later that, look, the Club Q shooting was a big deal for us because we were actually planning something for Trans Day of Remembrance at Stonewall the next day. So we had press waiting for us when we got there because we had another mass shooting. But since then, Kelly Loving, who was trans, had moved to the area. There's now the Kelly Loving Act in Colorado
Right.
that takes care of misgendering and takes care of, but at least opens up more rights for gender diversity and does criminalize dead naming and a lot of things that we were learning about 10 years ago of why we weren't really getting the numbers of trans deaths anyways. Their family members wouldn't
They did.
openly
Right.
admit they were trans. You'd have a friend later saying no, she wanted to be called Star, for instance, and then we'll update that. So there's been a lot of progress that way, but then Parkland is a big huge part of us as well, because we as a group, GAG would protest on Valentine's Day. We'd have a bloody Valentine to be a street action, and then later we took it to the Senate Hart Building, where we would get people arrested for we'd put a big fabric heart in the middle of the ground, saying you're killing us, gun violence is killing us, all the things that people from ACT UP and other Queer Nation brought in.
Yeah.
Marriage equality, all of their thoughts of how to bring this issue to the table were utilized this way. And then we went outside, and that's when you learn there's another mass shooting, and now it's a school. So the Olivers are like family to us. They come to New York, and their direct action with art, or artivism, as we'll call it, really stands out to us. And then we had a survivor of Parkland commit suicide recently. Just mental health issues, just battling it for
I know, but
7
I
years.
remember reading that. But listen to all the things that you're saying, what came before, right? And what the actions could be in reaction to that. And now we've rolled into, I think, a whole new level. What do you think are the actions that people, if anyone is listening out there, that they personally can take to create not only more empathy, but to help get control in their communities that where you have open carry? How can they approach this problem?
I think it starts with respect for life.
Respect for
Um,
life, right?
love thy neighbor, as is not used in this country. Instead, we've been marketed to pin, other groups against each other. And I'll call out the NRA for doing this, because they were marketing that protesters were on the way. They were coming to get your guns, and they were riling up these people. And I won't mention the shooter's name, but his
Oh, don't. Yeah.
rancid mother drove him across the border, and now he has a government job, and he's celebrated for killing a white man that was protesting equality, equal rights. So that image and that reward within the white supremacy that is laced into all of this um, is what we're seeing tenfold now with ICE in
Tenfold.
the country.
Right.
Because the militarization of any police in any country, you can never works. I mean, you don't want to become a police state, and we're supposed to be the beacon of freedom. So I always tell people, hey, we're now in the social paradise, socialist paradise of New York City, where we can once again remind people of what's important, and not have
Yes.
corrupt politicians doing other people's bidding. But
And
yeah,
I feel, being in New York City, we call it the golden bubble here. I'm sure you've heard that, but let's talk about the other side of the coin. Okay. You're familiar, I know, with Project 2025. We saw their actions. It just happened in Minnesota. I personally believe they're going to go after sanctuary cities all over. I don't feel this turning down at any time soon. And I think my fear here is with New York. It could be way worse than Minnesota, because we're really crazy here, and we know a lot of the same people. We are primed here for fighting back. And there ICE has already been on Canal Street a couple of times. They retreated the times that they were here. But I think what worries me, Ty, we can talk about mobilizing people and the actions we can take and all of that, but how do we change the pulse, if you will, on the country and what's happening right now? You've used the word empathy a number of times. I feel like when I troll these really horrible Facebook groups, the things I read are just completely horrific. And my friends that have the belief system that we all have, they don't even read that stuff. So they believe that there can be a turnaround. I really don't know anymore. I don't. The amount of times I've read that the people that are protesters are paid actors. They would point to what GAG does, right? An action like human beings and say, oh, more paid actors. Why don't they get a job? The amount of times I've read that on social media or in a lot of the Facebook groups, and it completely enrages me. I don't know how to handle it.
Well, I mean, I have people scream that to my face. I mean, we used to
So
do
you're a paid
protests.
actor.
No, get a job. And it's like,
Get a
I
job.
have 3, and this is still important to me. Or the case being that I don't engage, you're right, with reading the trolls that we do. Our founder, one of our founders, co-founders, Kevin Herzog, does a lot of that. And he's like, yeah, you don't want to read what people are doing. They've messed up with our Facebook because they'll go in to find an image that maybe
Right.
you didn't have rights for. I mean, they're on it.
Oh yeah, they're on.
And that's the thing. The whole point I'm bringing that up is the exhilaration that you get. Maybe it's dopamine related to fighting with me, the target, a liberal being a target in America, from
Right.
how they've been marketed, from their own talk radio, from their NRA
Yeah,
magazines,
it's
from how that's been
everywhere.
built up.
Everywhere it's coming at you from all directions.
And it's okay to, it's been validated, and the people that have gone along with it are officially out of bullshit. It's like you didn't want to listen to us because you paid someone to make you angry.
Yeah.
And that exhilaration and that transaction in the religion of this country is evil. Like, it's literally defined as evil acts, what people are referring to in the name of their religion too, is the irony that we're stuck in. It's like, I won't stand up to say, all white people should be this, or it's not a racial thing for me, because I can elevate to a level of, I don't have to take my anger out on someone else.
Right.
And New York will yell at each other, will scream at each other when you do something wrong, or it can get heated. But also we could be the person to just not do that, and not try to,
Absolutely.
like you said, I won't say that, but I've been in that situation where, okay, so the whole thing is almost, that exhilaration is almost a drug, and we're not replacing it with anything. Fox News spouts out what they want, it gets
That's
worse with
whatever
truth.
they want.
So it's gotten to a point where people are just thriving off that good feeling of having someone to hate. The other psychological thing that America has is there's always a gun on the table. No matter where your house is or your home is, I say America's home has a gun on the table, because there's no law to lock it up. There's no one's counting your ammo when it's at home. It's a
Right.
completely different thing, where an active duty person who's deployed, we have counted ammo that's issued. A serial number is next to my name when I sign for this weapon, and it's used in an armory. Like, the parts of arming military
Yeah,
and arming civilians, that line is so broken in this country.
absolutely.
Um, but the people, the snakes that do require you to follow this in ranges and so forth, they refuse to have these turn into laws, because it just sells more guns. At the end of the day, whatever sells more guns, a mass shooting will sell more guns. A Democratic politician coming in will sell more guns. So when that started to go down, when Trump was elected the first time, pardon, Voldemort, excuse me,
Okay.
I meant that when that happened the first time, gun sales went down, and that's this counteraction, was to put all of your hate and misery of your life onto liberals who, and I'll quote this, I have a
Yeah.
stepsister. She's like, well, we're never all going to get together and sing Kumbaya. And I said, and it reached this, and this is my thing, like, well, that song has been recorded for 100 years, meaning the
Right.
first found recording that we have of Kumbaya is from 1926. So we have had 100 years to come together, because it's like the refusal of you not wanting unity, and it's cool not to like the other people, like all of that manipulation. The turning point isn't that we can show empathy through one person. Like everyone has to be deprogrammed.
Right, but you're dealing okay, let's talk about, like, the culture, right?
Gun culture itself, or just the American
Okay, let's talk about the
machismo.
100 years, the American culture, and within that, the gun culture and how it seems to be so important to people. I in Pennsylvania, I've spoken to people there on their personal feelings about why they need to have their guns, and then there's people that are benign about it. Maybe they have a family, maybe the state police take an hour to come. Okay, hear me out on this one, because they do. But then you have the other people that have their basement filled with all kinds of guns. We've got militias. How do you talk to people about that? And I don't even know where to start to change that kind of mindset.
um it's difficult to ask someone if they're really happy, because if they're not happy with anything else, and this is their friends are at these gun clubs as
Right.
well. Their friends have the same day in and day out of a gun being in the house. Psychologically, like I was saying on the table, though, if there's a gun in the equation, then no matter what your conflict is, your brain is putting that into multiple choice of solutions. It's just a proven fact that if you lock people in a room and they start discussing things with guns or without guns,
It
eventually someone is using that gun in their solution, even if it's just
right,
writing it on paper. So
right,
that's what I was saying. America has the gun on the table anyway. We're already thinking of, oh, I can just end that problem.
right.
And instead of breathing exercises or something as silly as, that may sound, there's
I
tons more problems. But getting to a person to say it's one at a time, is it it's I've been to Pennsylvania, so that's where we used to protest at the gun shows.
Oh yeah,
Um,
believe me, they're out by they're out by me in Pennsylvania. We have
because
an
those guns
ammunition factory as well. So yeah, it's
but those
culture.
are the guns that are getting into New York, because you can just send somebody into a gun show to get it. Now, what we tend to do was go a little bit later in the day. We weren't blocking their, sales. The managers of them, the owners of the companies were like, hey, I believe in the First Amendment too,
Yeah,
and they would be very okay, do what you want to do. And we're like, we're here to offer more information on gun violence prevention. We're also representing the lives of people who've been lost, some in domesticated, some whatever. And someone will always go, oh, are you here because that shooting 2 weeks ago? And I'm like, no, you live in a country where there's always a shooting that you can
right,
equate,
right.
in your hometown. But the people coming out of the gun shows from Pennsylvania would say, I have gun control, I have two hands, and there is sort of that
I
guy that I'm not going to get to.
right.
But another one would lean in my face and say, have you even shot a gun? And it's like, yes. Well, when I was 18, I was trained
Of
and
course,
I've
you
been
have no
deployed
idea
to
who
two
you are
wars,
either.
but
Right.
it's not. That's the different culture from honoring the protective state of being, an armed military person, and what your call, what your duty is with that weapon versus when it's at home. So not being able to pass laws about locking up your weapons, but recently getting them, or at least when there's a child in the house, an 18 or younger, because over the last 10 years, over this decade, the number one killing of all children and
I
teens is
know,
gun
guns in the
violence,
home. Or
instead of poisoning or
I
accidents in
know.
cars. So the rates of those going up. We also were in double digits for per day in America when we started 10 years ago, where we were in the 90s would die today. We went up to 104 to 110 would die each day, depending on the records. But the CDC is not in control of putting out the right numbers anymore. And now once you have a
Right.
complete corrupt government, then no one's allowed to believe anything. And then if you want to keep going, you just believe your lie and you stick with your lie, and it feels better
Okay,
than the
but
truth.
so then, where does that leave all of us? As you know, you've probably spoke to a lot of people this week. I know I did, and people are really messed up from this. We don't know where we go from here. My daughter's generation, they are floundering because they don't know what's going to be next. It's like the underpinnings of everything has been taken out by this administration. And there is a part of me, okay, that like when I found out that you had served in the military, and I do want to talk about that, I thought, what a perfect spokesperson, right? To get into people's heads and talk about gun control versus gun violence, versus the gun that's on the table in the kitchen in someone's house. There's got to be a bridge, Ty, where we can come together and without people being so defensive and hostile and someone coming out of a gun show and saying to you, I bet you haven't even shot a gun. You know how ignorant that is. I feel like the dumbing down that has happened in this country, and it started for me with the fake news thing. That was the scariest thing because they just took up and blew whatever truth anyone ever believed in, right? Where do we go from here?
We have to be self-governed again, and we have to, reclaim democracy. We have to reclaim our freedom of speech and expression and not let that be taken away. The irony of Venezuela right now,
Yeah.
because maybe I said irony wrong, but it is ironic because what happened in that country was several years right before what happened to ours, and it's the exact same formula. It's the same dictator 101.
It is.
You dismiss the press first, and I had a very good friend of mine who was in a documentary class with me, whose father was arrested for posting, he was a journalist, for posting something against the president at the time while he was leaving Venezuela and in class with me. So I was getting updates on what was happening to
Yeah.
protesters there, and they were being gassed, and so I'm like, not many Americans really care about Venezuela politics in the first place.
I knew so many
But
Venezuelans up here. Come on, in New York, the amount of people from Venezuela, we knew this guy was a dictator. What was done though, and he was taken out of that country literally overnight by this administration, right? And the guy was a dictator. He was not a good person. However, it was done so swiftly. And I feel all these other actions that we talk about, the bills that are pending and being presented and the voting on this and the voting on that. If you look how this administration is moving, they're not paying attention to any of it. They're not paying attention to law. Okay. They're doing whatever the hell they want. And we're all left with the repercussions. I feel like we need to come together as a country and say, this is bull. And you're right to bring up Venezuela because we are going down that same rabbit hole. And
right.
if you followed what happened to the economy there, the shit really hit the fan.
You're right. And but everyone that was an ally of him did very well. And
right.
So
Same.
how you're manipulated through politics in every nation, everyone says there's corruption. For us to get together, this is what's happened. I think you are seeing reasonable leadership kind of form, and people that you can kind of trust are popping up, and they're going to be younger. And everyone over 70 who's in charge of someone else's life should resign on this planet. This world isn't for you anymore. Stop making decisions. Stop pressing links and buttons. And it's that much of a break between what was the largest population ever born on Earth at once, okay, is still white knuckling their youth to the point of everyone else's loss. And it's only in by sheer numbers, and there's certainly wonderful people of all age groups that
of course,
but I do think a lot has to do with that dying breed of consumerism, and how you were marketed becomes who you are in this country. And a simple reason: we brush our teeth twice a day because that's the commercial said, but wake up, go to bed. In Brazil, it's 3 times because they say after every meal in the commercial of the toothpaste they're selling. So it's the same thing with, love and hate. And when you have someone you're allowed to dismiss, like the trans community, Anytime you can hold up the Bible and say, see, they're not human, which this country has done in its
Right.
past.
Again and
So
again.
every time that you can use something that anchors your judgment, but yet you're really just exhilarated off of this kind of power and getting away with it, is what you're taught as a kid is evil. You're not supposed to feel good about getting away with stealing.
Right.
You're not supposed to feel good about people would die
Bullying,
and
all of it.
or
Yeah,
bullying
people
the
do.
dead. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
actually bullying the dead on TV as a news anchor.
I know.
And that kind of thing is like, no, none of this is tasteful, but it's exciting and it's just TV. And I'm like, no, your brain is registering this is real enough where this is turning you into this kind of person where you crave it and you want it and you don't care that it happens. Or
Right.
you've turned a blind eye, and I've sat next to some very famous people that I looked up to as a teenager watching Lifetime, as a
Yeah, yeah.
single mother and watching the stuff on Lifetime and her go, I don't have time for politics. She's just like, I'm too busy for politics. I'm like, someone in your life is really being hurt by how close you could be to politics and saving the people around you with that much power.
Right, but
So it is people
they've
with
been desensitized, okay? What you're talking
sure.
about is
And that's why
desensitized, and there is one thing you said, I don't totally agree with you. If you look at I watch the videos of the protests, for a number of reasons all over, and I look at the demographic. Sometimes it's hard because people have, the face masks on, but a lot of the people that are out protesting are that older demographic that, you just said they should get out of the way. That maybe they could get out of the way, but I don't know who's going to carry the mantle then.
I'm not saying protesters. I'm saying when you are making decisions about the environment and human
Okay, you're
lives,
talking
you
about
have
the
failed.
politicians. Yeah,
Right. But
yeah,
the people
I
who
hear
are
you.
taking to the streets, they've always taken to the streets.
Right.
I mean, that's what started with them in the 60s or the 70s. And then I realized this, a few protests ago, or maybe it was the failed, we used to have Women's March, and then it was kind
Yeah,
of drowned into the People's March. And I
right.
remember seeing people in the back of the heads. I'm like, these people are fighting for nuclear power, against nuclear power, certain points. These people were protesting this, in their 20s. And it becomes part of your life. It becomes, you've stood up for something. And when there's an injustice and you're kind of refocused to what's important
Yeah,
and how much life better, how much your life could be better if you were involved and felt like you were honoring, your community or your neighborhood or even your generation, whatever it is at that point that you're saying no, this is being attacked. It's very rewarding, but it's always one step forward, two steps back when you have people calculating against you and looking into um, we're also worried that maybe the power that comes from a nonprofit could go away. I mean, there's a lot of different people that are
right now,
could
yeah.
be torn apart because they know how powerful we are. So artivism, not just taking to the streets but sharing what's on the streets, um, doing it yourself and correcting people, saying no, the people that are doing this, my cousin does this and this is why, because the reaction of they never should have been there, um, that never should have been a violent situation was what you should have said first.
Oh,
Person's
that
in the wrong
is
place.
so 100%
But
spot
you've been
on.
marketed to be able to block anything that I throw at you other than, oh my God, I physically feel responsible for this and I don't know why. I'm like, because you've shut off your empathy. The same thing happened to me for Sandy Hook. We had a holiday party that day. I was reading, the app is telling me how many people are, being killed in the school, but I had to drive to this restaurant for a holiday party. No one brought it up. And then when I came home,
That
my
makes me
boyfriend's
think.
sobbing because he's watching the news.
Right.
And it's like, oh yeah, where was my soul for that 4 hours? I had to get something done. And I'm like, and that's when I kind of realized that's
Wow.
what people are able to do all the time.
Yeah, they're able to
And until you
absolutely.
can't, and unfortunately, you don't want to be the one that's crossed the line. You can't because now you're a survivor of gun violence, and you've lost a family member to, something as unfortunate as, standing up for someone's rights gets you, killed here.
Right.
But you're right. There are people taking the streets that are protesting more in my lifetime, obviously, than not around for the 60s, but for enough to see, no, this is how we're going to react. That people will take the streets, they will repaint the rainbows back on the streets, they'll do
Yeah.
whatever they can. So I do feel good about that. Having an overpowerful um, uh, intrusive thoughts because of politics, though, is what you probably should have to clear your head of first. And that's what's going to be the easiest thing to do, is just go, wait, what if I'm just kumbaya for a minute and zen for a minute, and find out who I really am? Because you know what, I've also been laid off. I have to take care of my aging parents at
Parents,
certain times.
right?
I have all of these things that are adding up, and there's not a gun on the table. That thought isn't there, but
Right.
there's a
I
lot
never
of
thought
men.
about that till you said that, I never thought about it, like the choice that from your multiple choices, gun being one of them, because it's there, it's a part of who you are. I didn't grow up with I grew up in New York,
Right.
wasn't even in the equation. You're interesting to me because I do want to talk about you a little bit.
Sure.
You joined the Air Force. Tell us about that.
Who was that guy? Yeah, I guess part of the story was I just knew I had to get out of there. And
Where
I
was
didn't
there?
have
Tell
Virginia
us.
Beach. I'm from Virginia Beach. I'd lived there most of my life. My mother and I, after my stepfather died, we were in Texas for a few years. I lived in Austin,
Okay.
uh, but I was very young, so I wasn't a full-on Austinite. My mother had more fun there than I did, but
At least someone had fun.
came back to Virginia when we needed to. And then, yeah, right after high school, it just came to me that I had friends that are a year older, I have friends that are younger, and I just saw how they're still controlled by their parents regardless. So I
Right.
really needed to make a clean break.
You wanted
Um,
to make a stand for yourself.
yeah, my family had a business, that was easy to start working at if I wanted to. I mean, there were things that I'm able to do from. It's a small town, but it's also so many people travel there in and
Sure.
out.
I know
Um,
Virginia Beach, I've been there.
right. But I mean, I didn't want to be connected to it. I knew I had something else. Being a gay man with a little dog in New York City, I guess, is just always what I thought I was going to
That's
be.
right. Listen, I have, I'm here with my little dog too. There's tons of us. But what was it like? Were you gay when you joined the military?
I didn't think of it as something that was ever going to be possible. Yeah, it was there in my head. I mean, I had, you know, been sexualized as a child enough where I knew, okay, I have to hide this. So my lies started very early. And my closeting was very early, but also the question, have you ever or ever been, was marked out the day I joined. I mean, it was 93. So Don't Ask, Don't Tell had just started in a
Yeah.
way where I could just kind of walk in, hi everybody, and do my job. And sure, people thought things, but then other people thought, the girl that I was eating lunch with all the time was my girlfriend. So
Right.
it just depended. But I was young, so I didn't think that far ahead because I didn't have what a future would look like. What would married me look like? I didn't see that until I was older. But I traveled the world, and I think I changed the Air Force just as much as it changed me with,
Of
my
course.
perception of
Yeah.
what was happening. And I tried to be indispensable so they couldn't find a way to get rid of me. If I
Were
happened to
there
fall under one of those
aspects
kind
though
of bosses.
of being gay in the military at that time, at the beginning of Don't Ask, Don't Tell? Were there aspects of what you saw and heard in the military that bothered you?
Um, well, you had mandatory training after a while. Anytime they have a new policy, they're like, okay, let's have training on it.
Yeah, yeah.
So, you hear giggles in that. I mean, I was in a very, I mean, intelligence analysts themselves, hold themselves to a certain, respectable level, and it's an office job. So it wasn't in the dirt, wrestling with guys that were gonna. It wasn't like how a movie would make it seem like everyone was uncomfortable that I might be turned on or something silly. I had my own life and I came to work and so forth, but we were kind of snobs about our career field. I mean, it's very difficult to do what we do. And people will take every chance they can to say that it's not or blame us when it's their fault.
Right. Trying to
But
be
I say we were like mushrooms. We take on the flavor of whoever we're supporting, and when we're left alone, we grow wild and poisonous. But it's part of my life as well. I mean, being an analyst, I was saying you
yeah.
can't take that out of your head when you turn on the news, whereas you could other jobs that were still just as important. It's just that one happened to always be on. So doing something like an activist in being in gag or
Oh yeah, I can see it.
supporting any of that is still part of like, okay, you kind of become that person for it to work. And it doesn't mean that you revert to, a part of yourself you don't understand. It's just you grow in a way
Of course.
that I have bearing from what the military taught me, and I have and having a uniform on kept me from interacting and yelling at people and stuff because you're representing, and you have all your medals on and you're like, no, I'm going to be proud and quiet. And I think the person outside of that did have a secret life. So luckily it went well for me,
Yeah.
because there was a lot of people who, when if they were going to be caught or something could happen, that weighing on them, uh, I didn't have to really worry about. I kind of just, hey, I'm Thai, and I fit in the way that I fit in on with everyone.
That is actually a very good way to think about oneself. You obviously have good self-esteem. For the person that doesn't, the military can be disaster. I had someone on here, Vincent, I think Donofrio, who wrote the book Gays in the Military. It's pictorials and it's interviews. And he's been on this show, and it's really heartbreaking how devalued a lot of the people in that book fell. And then now the latest, people losing their pensions and things like that, this administration has completely devalued and put down, and it's completely horrific, and nobody's saying squat about it out there. I mean, I just don't know. I never thought I'd see anything like this. I thought, as I'm sure you did, we were all moving forward, right? We were all going to have actions that were going to take us forward, and maybe it wouldn't be kumbaya, okay, but the trans community was certainly making strides, and
In record time, like
it was
dominoes
insane.
falling down. Like as soon as it's down, it's like, up, all these rights are going to be put in place. So we do have to say state laws are important.
They no,
State
I
elections are.
completely
You
I
have to have
agree.
an example,
Yeah,
just like banning assault weapons in one state, how that's worked. Or holding parents accountable when they're the owner of the gun that their child
absolutely.
has used.
Yeah,
Like there's things that are very common sense that a lot of gun owners would agree to, but that's just not how the formula is.
right.
So um, for me, I don't still think in a military sense, but it is interesting to be been closeted for a while. I guess 17 years, and then the last 3 years of my last 3 years, I was a master sergeant, and I retired. I had my boyfriend at the time, was able to put on my little pin on stage
I
because it
love
was
it.
just right as things were kind of unfolding for us as well. And then I took a job supporting. I took a job in Afghanistan after I retired for a year, and then AFN, the Armed Forces Network, what we watch when we're deployed, instead of watching commercials, like they would feed in shows and then give out a PSA would take up the space of
PSAs.
where,
So you were based in
instead of the shows.
Afghanistan at that point.
A couple of point, yeah, I've been to Iraq and Afghanistan, a few years out
But
of
were
my
you
life.
but because of what you did, because it was intelligence, did you ever feel like your life was going to be threatened? Because you weren't out in combat.
Well, those two wars, you are no, you're not. You're just out.
Right.
So if you're traveling, then you're just
It,
vulnerable to whatever's going on. But I'm
in your
certainly,
in
I wasn't.
uniform, right?
Right. Or I mean, there's pictures of me, actually I was one of the first 100 outed when we had Outserve magazine. My friend was running, the Iraq and Afghanistan numbers. He's like, they only have 60 people. Do you want to put your picture in? I'm like, fine. So I like sent a couple, but I had a beard in that one. So it just depends on your job and what you're doing. But to go full circle and then see AFN have a Pride Month um, on the Armed Forces, network during June after I had retired, that's what kind of like kicked in. But now, as they try to wipe everything
You're
away,
just trying to wipe everything away
but
now.
it's also it's a very I don't understand. I mean, there used to be people who were writing letters, all the time saying how the military would fall apart if these people were allowed to be out and yada yada. So it's just it worked completely fine, and it looked how much work someone had to do to get rid of the progress. instead of just saying, oh, well, this didn't work. There's like, let's just remove any kind of ownership.
Right.
But all of that comes back. We find to re-honor people later in life. It comes in. I don't say the world's a cycle. It's a spiral. And that's why I can see things that have happened before a couple of decades ago, and I go, it feels like a circle, but no, we've moved forward. It's a spiral. We have to make sure we're not going down.
Right.
But with my ability to kind of have a camaraderie with everyone in the military at the time too, and then knowing that some of them are gun owners, some of them are morally, going to say they're morally opposed to certain things, but there is the ability with a mission, with when you have honor, when you have all of that involved,
Yeah.
and then we could get together and we got along. So it's just as easy for the country and for your neighbors to get along. But the examples of how to get along with people aren't what's popular. The examples are how to insult. The examples are how to get away with being malicious and bad and owning it, and then
And
shaming anyone
hateful.
who doesn't
And,
want to have
shaming,
any
shaming
emotional
anyone else.
attachment.
Yeah.
So it's
Wow.
more than tacky, but it's like it's gross. So I say, like, so you feel like you're in another uh, transported to another dimension. I feel like it's an old gross comforter that I threw away that I have to put back on. Like there's something dirty that I feel like I've had to put back over myself as a protector that I didn't want anymore.
Right.
And that's what having that kind of rhetoric, which is what we're dealing with, is rhetoric, speech, hate speech, and all this leads to
Again and
violence.
again and again and again. So I'm going back to when you were in the military. Social media didn't have the kind of presence that what we're dealing with now. Do you blame a lot of this hate rhetoric on social media?
Um, I don't blame it. I think there's no it doesn't it you feel like there's no consequences with it, and it's
Right.
not the same feeling of, oh, I just accidentally hit someone's car. And you're like, I've made the mistake, I feel guilty for doing that. But calling someone the worst thing you can think of and not being held accountable for it becomes addictive. So
Right.
it's not every kind of personality, it's not everyone, but if there's an opportunity to get hate. But I've been yelled at recently too, more as an adult than I had before, and you're just like, what are you gaining by yelling out something like that without me trying to be violently yelling back?
Yeah, I have to say, how do you handle that?
I had a teacher once who said, she just blew these guys a kiss in the car, when they were being jerks to her, or just have the confidence to be like, I'm not, this person's not going to interject in my life. I mean, whatever's going on with them is not going
Has got
to
nothing to do with me,
ruin my day. And you think, you have a mantra. My grandmother used to say, "Don't be ugly."
I love
Um,
that, right? Don't you be
once
ugly.
Right, but then, later I'm like, also, ugly people don't matter. You know what I mean? Like that kind of hate and stuff that's stirring inside that they want to take
Yeah,
out on you doesn't matter to your direction. But like you said, depending on where you are, who's armed, who's not, did they build a gun in their, own house because they, have ghost guns and all the little things that have picked up with technology.
oh my god, the
Um,
3D guns that people can print through. I can't even wrap my head around that.
no, there needs to be, and if it's a male white problem that has not been solved by a white male. So like no one has shamed the right people out of this behavior. And then everyone's kind of joined on like, oh, that's the winning race. That's the winning team. That's so you feel exhilarating when you vote for someone and they win.
Right.
But it's just like driving without a muffler. I mean, there's reasons we have this rule. You're
Your
just skirting
analogies
everything
are really
else
great.
everywhere else.
Right.
Anyway, I'll go on and on about it, but
Well, we're down to the wire here. So, how do people find out more about GAG?
we have an up and running site, gaysagainstguns.org. I think it works also with .nyc. The Insta account that we have, our Instagram account, is where most people follow us. That's at Gays Against Guns NY for New York.
Right.
But we have a lot of things coming up. We have a full featured film documentary about our last 10 years.
Amazing.
It's going to be called Gays Against Guns. That's debuting in Dublin at their film festival, the Dublin International Film Festival, on February 23rd, because Paul Rowley has been documenting GAG from day one. He was born in Ireland, came to America, and his perception of what gun violence is kind of layered in with the film. But it shows all of our ups and downs that we've had, and it really hones in on some survivors
So
and
can we hope
families
to
left
see it
behind.
here in this country? It'll be in
Absolutely,
festivals or
yes.
screenings or.
Well, we want to go into like film festival circuits, but I also would like to maybe go to centers with it.
I'm
Travel to
thinking
different.
like our LGBTQ center here in New York be perfect to screen it there also.
Yeah,
Paul.
I mean, we have donors that have given us money before we want them to see it. So we have several events that'll be planned. It's the 10-year marker of Pulse on June 12th. So that we'll have another rally for.
Wow.
And we also had our 49 lives lost were represented by 49 HBs. So we'll be utilizing them in Pride and during that time. So they're going to be a lot busier and more. Our social media be a little bit more full with honoring those lives for this 10th year.
Have a whole lot coming up. We are at the end of, I don't know where the time went. I loved having you on. You gave a whole perspective to something that people want to know more about. You're a fabulous spokesperson for gun violence.
I appreciate you're sweet.
You really are, because of your background and everything. I always like to take a picture at the end. So,
I think Poppers has had enough. Hold on one second.
Wait, are you going to get your dog? You have to come back because I need to take this picture. Are you getting your dog? Because I had my dog. Okay, put your dog in the picture. Great.
All right, but you got to get my hair too. Poppers. Here we go.
Great. We're good. Ty, thank you so much. You really did share a very unique perspective for people. You're a non-for-profit, and a lot of people have not heard about GAG, and I want to get the word out there. I'm a shout out here to my amazing friend, Libby Edwards, who is an incredible activist and introduced me to you. And thank you for everything that you have shared here with us today. For whatever reason, I feel better than I have in the last couple of days. I don't feel so alone.
Well, good. Our next show on Radio GAG will be Death by Ice. So we will be covering a lot of what's transpired, also paying honoring those lost. But so that's the next show that'll be released on our end.
Okay,
and it's available everywhere.
So they can find this all on your Instagram or your website. Yeah. Yes.
Or if you listen to podcasts anywhere, it's Radio GAG, the Gays Against Gun Show.
Oh yeah, yeah, of course. All right, Ty, thank you so much for being here with us tonight. Everybody, stay warm wherever you are. We'll be back next week. Bye-bye.